Mermaids are quite the popular mythical creature, and they're often seen in different types of movies made for children and even adults. Young girls would frequently dress up as them for Halloween and talk about how they wish more than anything that they could become one of these creatures. Hell, they would even make potions to try and become one. Most people assume mermaids don't exist, and why would they? No one had ever spotted a mermaid relaxing on land or swimming through the water, and underwater expeditions revealed no evidence of any sort of underwater society. There was simply no evidence to prove mermaids truly existed, so to humans, they were nothing more than a myth. But as it turns out, mermaids are very much a real thing. They just keep themselves hidden from the prying eyes of humans. Several kingdoms exist throughout the ocean, some in valleys and some within the walls of deep sea trenches. The citizens of these kingdoms all did what they could to stay hidden, and therefore, most were in very secluded, hard to find or reach areas. These measures taken to keep themselves hidden often made it difficult for other mermaids to even find them. A lot of merfolk despise humans due to the pollution dumped into the ocean, oil spills, animals getting caught in plastic, entire islands of trash. It is all a detriment to the health of all sea life, which of course included merfolk. Many of them fear that during a simple outing, they will succumb to the horrors of a fishing net and become a human's next science experiment or meal. They feared that they might unintentionally ingest some of the garbage and suffocate to death. All of this fear from so many incidents in the past kept them secluded from underwater research expeditions humans embarked on, all except for one young mermaid, that is. A mermaid who loved to explore the open ocean and discover its unknown wonders, regardless of any danger. Although what fascinated her more than anything else was the very people her kind feared more than anything else. She loved any information she could find about the human world and loved to search through shipwrecks or other sunken human objects and see what could be learned from them. She didn't want to become a human herself per se, but she would do almost anything to gather as much information as she possibly could on humans. Pollution didn't scare her. She had her ways of avoiding it without being harmed. You learn a lot over many years of doing something. She was simply adventurous and wanted to learn more. She wanted to explore. This young mermaid's name was Kona. The small rays of sunlight that reached all the way down to this particular town of mermaids peeked through the windows of houses built into large coral formations. Kona groaned and turned over to block the offending light and quickly covered her face with her blanket. But once she had been disturbed, she couldn't return to the bliss of sleep and decided to just get up. Kona pushed aside the blanket and sat up with a big stretch and yawn before rubbing the remaining sleep from her eyes. She then got up from her bed and swam over to the little vanity area she had set up in her room and sat down on the stool. She picked up the brush and began to run it through her hair to rid it of any tangles or knots. Once satisfied, she took her signature seashell clip and clipped it into her hair to keep some of her bangs out of her eyes. She smiled contently as this seashell clip was very important to Kona because to her it represented the last memory of her family, the family that had given her up. As far as Kona had been told throughout her entire life, she had been born to ye average young couple. The thought of being parents excited them throughout the course of the pregnancy, but they quickly realized after Kona was born that they were nowhere near prepared for the amount of responsibility it takes to look after and raise a child. Having a child took up too much of their free time, and they were no longer able to do many of the things they loved. And so they came to a decision. They didn't want the responsibility of raising a child, but they still loved her and wanted her to have an easy life, so they decided to leave Kona with her grandparents. One day, Kona's parents simply dropped her off at her grandparents' house and told them that they would be back after going out for the day, but they didn't come back. They never came back to bring Kona home. They had simply abandoned her. They had good intentions in wanting Kona to live with people who loved her and were willing to take on the responsibility of raising her, but they went about it in a way that left Kona wondering whether or not her parents actually loved her for most of her life. Kona was too young to understand where her parents were when they first left, but as she grew up, she began to come to terms with their absence. She was still upset, but she was able to better see where they were coming from and why they chose to leave. This understanding eventually morphed into a desire to find her parents again someday because she wanted to tell them that she understood and was no longer upset. She wanted to ask them, where had they been? Had they been happy? Did they regret abandoning her? Kona wanted to ask all of these questions, but wanted to make sure her parents knew that she was no longer upset and that she still loved them. Kona looked at her reflection in the mirror and the seashell clip. Someday I'll find you. All ready for the day, Kona got up from her stool and grabbed her brown satchel that hung off of one of the sides of her mirror, slinging it over her shoulder and heading towards the door of her room. She swam into the hallway and towards the downstairs chamber. Houses in this city of mermaids were a lot different than what you would typically see on landed human houses. For one, mermaids don't have legs and therefore don't really need stairs in their homes or other buildings. Also, this particular town was in a hidden valley in the sea. Surrounding the valley were large underwater mountains that helped keep them hidden from humans. That and the fact that their area was very well known for being a habitat for many kinds of sharks. They were actually there to keep the mermaid society safe from human contact. Within the valley between these underwater mountains, there was a very large and very beautiful coral reef that was the home to many kinds of underwater life, which of course included mermaids, and the city was fittingly named Coral Reef City. Houses, stores, and other buildings for mermaids were essentially built right into the coral, which meant most, if not all, buildings were vertical and were multiple levels high. Instead of stairs, there were vertical shafts or chambers that served as ways to travel from different floors or levels. They were sort of like elevator shafts that humans would use. Kona swam into the downstairs chamber and then swam into the living room area. She observed her grandmother in the kitchen, who seemed to be making breakfast, and then saw her grandfather sitting on the couch reading the morning newspaper. She swam over to the counter and sat down on one of the stools. "Good morning, Nan," she greeted cheerfully. "Ah, good morning, Kona," her Nan responded with the same amount of cheer. "Did you sleep well last night?" "I did. I had an amazing dream where I was exploring another shipwreck, and it had the most amount of gold, jewelry, and statues that I have ever seen. It was so pretty, and we became so rich after I brought all of the objects home," Kona explained. "I hope to find an actual shipwreck like that someday because it would mean you and Pa would be able to live comfortably for the rest of your lives." "That's very sweet of you, Kona, but you don't have to worry about us." "Yes, I do. You're my grandparents, and I want you to live easy lives." Kona's grandma smiled gently and put a hand on her head. "Thank you, Kona. You've grown into a very nice young girl." "Thank you, Nan," Kona responded with a smile. "I made some seaweed pancakes for breakfast today. I know you enjoy those," her grandma said, setting a plate down in front of her. "Paul, breakfast is ready." Kona's grandfather got up from the couch and swam over to the counter, taking a seat right next to her. He gave her a warm smile. "Good morning, kiddo." "Morning, Pa." "Are you doing anything fun today?" "I do have a new shipwreck to explore," Kona said. "Corinne told me that there's one a few miles outside of the city, so I want to go and see it if it has anything interesting inside." "Maybe it will be filled with a treasure like the one in your dream," her grandmother mentioned. "Maybe. It's at the bottom of a deep trench and has been there for centuries. Or was it decades? I don't know. Apparently humans haven't even tried to explore it yet. They might not even know it's there to begin with. There could be so much fun stuff in there," Kona explained. "Will you be upset if you don't find what you expect?" her grandmother asked. "I might be disappointed depending on what I find, but I'll enjoy the experience regardless. Exploring new areas and finding new things is my favorite thing to do, so every opportunity to explore is a positive experience. That's the spirit." "Are you sure you want to go that far? You could find yourself in danger of being seen by a human or even worse. I don't want you getting hurt out there," her grandfather said. "I'll be safe, Pa. Don't worry." "I'm always going to worry about you. You're my little girl, and I want you to be safe." Kona smiled and blushed a bit. Even if she did miss and wanted to find her birth parents, she was still extremely grateful for the family she did have. Her grandparents had been there for her every step of the way and had always had her back. They supported her and kept her safe from harm. They were the best grandparents anyone could ask for, and Kona thought that she was the luckiest mermaid in the world to have them. "I will be safe, Pa. If anything happens while I'm gone, I will come straight home. I promise." "Okay, I trust you." The three of them moved on to other more generic conversation topics while they enjoyed their breakfast. Kona ate relatively quickly as she was very eager to get out and go explore the shipwreck. It would probably be the same boring wooden structure filled with relics overtaken by algae, but there was always a chance that there would be something new and exciting as well. Besides, like she had told her grandparents, exploring was always a positive and fun experience regardless of what she found. Kona finished her food and put her plate and silverware neatly by the edge of the sink. She then swam to the door and grabbed the handle, but was stopped. "Be safe out there, Kona. I trust you will make the right choices, but make sure to come back if you are in any sort of danger. If you feel anything is wrong at any point, remove yourself from the situation and get somewhere safe," her grandmother said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I love you." "I love you too, Nan. I promise I'll be careful." Kona lovingly embraced her grandmother before opening the door and leaving the house. Coral Reef City was your average city, but just so happened to be underwater. There were plenty of shops selling various goods ranging from fashion to food, and there were high amounts of fin traffic in more popular areas. Of course, merfolk didn't have cars or other motorized vehicles, and instead rode on larger sea animals, that were also their well loved pets, if they didn't feel that swimming on their own was fast enough. The castle where the royal family lived was built towards the far north side of the valley and was in its own set aside field with many different kinds of sea foliage. The entire city was very comfortable, and everyone within the walls of the mountains were perfectly willing to stay put and never leave due to the fear of encountering humans. Kona, of course, didn't care and would much rather prefer to leave the confines of the town. She wanted to explore the open ocean that had long been forgotten by her fellow merfolk. And luckily for her, there was no one who really cared to stop her because they didn't want to risk leaving the city themselves. At the same time, however, there were a lot of people who saw her as brave for wanting to leave and admired that bravery. Those people would never venture beyond the safety of the city themselves, but they still praised Kona's bravery for wanting to do so. She didn't see the bravery within herself, but still appreciated the frequent compliments she received. It was easy to leave this valley where Coral Reef City was. One could simply swim up and over the mountains, or they could leave through the main gate at the south end of the valley. Those were the two main ways to leave. Kona would most often choose to swim up and over the mountains because it provided her with less of a hassle when leaving. She did always have to re enter the city using the main gate, however, because the guards would need to verify her status as a citizen of the city. Kona swam over the mountains and began to swim westwards, following the direction she had been given by her friend. Corinne had always had a knack for learning of random things or locations and telling Kona of their existence so she could go and explore them. Kona did wonder how she knew so much about these locations, but didn't think about it too much as she appreciated the thought regardless. The trench where this shipwreck was about 5 miles to the west of the city, which Kona knew she'd be able to get to in just over an hour and a half if she swam fast enough, and so she did. She swam and swam as fast as she could, passing many different kinds of colorful fish and plants along the way. Kona eventually reached the mouth of the trench. She stopped to catch her breath, as swimming really did steal her breath sometimes. The swim itself only ended up taking about an hour, which Kona felt really proud of since she had expected to take longer to get there. Now all she had to do was venture into the trench itself. From the top, the trench's vast darkness was very evident. You couldn't see more than several meters down before there was nothing but near pitch black darkness that seemed to be endless. Kona wasn't afraid of much, but that didn't mean she didn't at least get nervous, and this trench was certainly making her feel nervous. "It's okay, Kona, you can do this," she mumbled to herself. "I have to tell Corinne what I found." Kona took a deep breath and began to swim downwards into the depths of the trench. "Good, she's been lured into our trap." "Lock!" "Yes." The mermaid with that name swam over once called and bowed in front of the one who had called them. This mermaid was covered with black scales all over their body and tail, which covered up their skin that seemed to be a deep red color. Their hair was pulled into a high ponytail held up by the same black scales. Their fingers were webbed, and the webbing was slightly brighter red than their skin. On their wrists and neck were golden cuffs that were tattered and dirty. They looked as if they had been very well used. The fins on their tail were the same color as the webbing between their fingers, but looked as if they had been ripped to near shreds. "The girl has been lured into the new trap. If all goes to plan, she will be able to lure out that fairy that escaped during our siege of the Ocean Kingdom. If we can capture that fairy, we can finally take the final bit of power we need to take over the human and mermaid worlds. Locke, I am putting you in charge of intercepting the girl and that fairy." "Yes, you can count on me, Scarp-sama." The other mermaid, Scarp, smirked and turned away. "Good. I expect good things from you, Locke." The darkness of the trench surrounded Kona, and there was no end to it in sight. She had reached the bottom of the trench and was now looking for the shipwreck itself. Mermaids were born with naturally amazing eyesight that allowed them to see things in very dark areas that an average human couldn't. A human might even consider it night vision. This meant that Kona didn't need a separate light source to be able to look around and explore the wreck. All she needed to do was to let her eyes adjust. Once her eyes had completely adjusted to the darkness, she began to swim along the bottom of the trench in search of the shipwreck. Luckily, the wreck was only about 30 feet from where she was, so she came across it very quickly. Kona swam around a bend in the trench, and her eyes widened. The ship wasn't very big, but it was unlike any ship Kona had ever seen. Most were made of wood and were some shade of brown, but this one seemed to be either made of wood that was bright white or had been painted as such when it was used. Of course, being underwater for so long had caused the color to fade greatly, but it was still very clear that the ship had once been a bright white. It was also evident that the edges and rims of the ship had been a mid to light toned purple color and had also been decorated with different kinds of gold details. This ship, it's bubble-tastic, she squealed happily. Kona swam to one of the sides of the shipwreck where she saw there was a large opening in the side of the hull, the perfect opening. She swam through and began to look around inside. Nothing about the inside immediately stood out to her. The inside walls were roughly the same washed out white as the outside, with algae close to where the floor was, and there were signs that objects had been there at some point in time. But there was no obvious current signs of statues, chests, relics, nothing. Anything you would expect to see on a shipwreck just simply wasn't there, which really disappointed Kona. She wanted to find at least something to bring home, even if it was a small object worth nothing more than bragging rights. A sigh of disappointment left her mouth, but Kona pushed her feelings aside and decided to look at the ship more in depth than just a first glance. She looked around pillars, underneath built in benches, above shelves. She searched everywhere, and yet there was still nothing. What kind of shipwreck was this? It looked as if it had been completely cleaned out. Did Corinne tell me to look here as a joke? There's nothing here, Kona muttered to herself and looked to her left. She observed a flimsy-looking wall that was to the far left side of the ship from where she had first entered, and there was also a door almost perfectly camouflaged against it. A door? How did I miss that? Kona immediately swam over and turned the handle and found that luckily the door had not been locked. In fact, the door opened quite easily due to the water degrading it over time. The door opened into a small office. There were 2 bookshelves on either side of the door, a desk, and a chair. There were no books on the shelves, nothing on top of the desk, nothing on the floor. The empty furniture seemed to be the only thing in the room. You've got to be kidding me, Kona muttered in an irritated tone and swam behind the desk in hopes of finding something, anything that would be there. There was nothing on or in the desk, but on the floor underneath, Kona saw that there was another door. She raised an eyebrow as it was quite small and moved to sit on the floor so she could more easily reach the knob. She opened the small door and was surprised to see there was actually a cavity in the ground, a secret compartment, some would say, with something inside. It wasn't much, but there was a small brown box. Kona picked it up and noticed that there were obviously several objects inside based on the way the box rattled when she had picked it up, so she was immediately excited. On this box there was a lock on the front latch, but as with many other parts of the shipwreck, it had degraded enough over time to where Kona could easily pull it off. She set the box down, pulled the lock open, and opened the lid. There were several different objects in this box. There was a small book that looked like something someone would use for a diary, as well as 5 seashell-shaped objects that were likely some kind of jewelry. 4 of the 5 were golden compacts with crystalline heart-shaped gems on the front, while the other seemed to also be a compact, but instead was purple with a golden rim instead. Kona had never seen anything like these, and so she was unsure of what they could be. Unsure of the compacts, Kona picked up the book. As far as she could tell, it looked like a normal book from the human world. This made it all the more perplexing that the pages and binding were all still completely intact. The pages were clearly made out of paper and the binding and cover leather, but it was in pristine condition. This shouldn't have been possible due to the water. This has got to be some sort of waterproof paper. There's no way it should look this good, Kona mumbled while grabbing the front cover and opening the book to the first page. The first page had what looked to be a drawing of a baby dolphin with a small bow on its dorsal fin. The drawing was quite cute and caused Kona to smile. But that changed very quickly. Only a few seconds after the journal had been opened, a bright light began to shine from the drawing, and a high-pitched squealing could be heard. Then, suddenly, something flew out of the light and hit Kona directly in the face. Ugh! Kona fell back against the ground with a decent thud. The book fell from her hands and closed upon coming into contact with the ground. She put a hand on her forehead and rubbed it to try and soothe the dull pain. Ow! What the hell was that? It feels so good to be free from the book feet! Kona opened her eyes and looked back towards the bottom of the desk where the floor compartment was, and was surprised to see what looked like a small baby dolphin floating above the book. What the? She shouted and immediately backed herself up against the wall. The small dolphin was startled when Kona shouted, and it turned around and immediately looked at her with fear-filled eyes. The two locked eyes and stared at each other for what felt like hours before the dolphin finally squealed with delight. You freed me, Fee! It immediately swam over to Kona and did its best to wrap its small fins around her arm, and it was clearly meant to be a hugging gesture. Kona only blinked in confusion. Who? No. What are you? What was that light? What happened? Ah, forgive my rudeness, Fee, the dolphin said and let go of Kona's arm. My name is Delphi, and I am the royal advisor to the Prince of the Ocean Kingdom, Fee. The Ocean Kingdom? Yes, Fee. We don't have a prince? Kona was very confused as to what Delphi was talking about. The Ocean Kingdom? Was she referring to Coral Reef City? Was she referring to another far-off mermaid kingdom? If she was, then this was a kingdom that Kona had never heard of. No, silly, not your kingdom, Fee. I'm talking about my kingdom, Fee. I'm sorry, I'm so lost. Could you start over? Of course, Delphi said with a wide smile. The Ocean Kingdom is a world where mermaids occupy both land and sea, as they can take on human forms when they go on land, Fee. There are also creatures like me who are referred to as fairies. We can take on the form of an animal in the water or a human form on land, Fee. Everyone lives together peacefully and happily while working together to keep our magic strong, Fee. We also had a wonderful prince who made sure everything ran smoothly in the kingdom, Fee. He was very kind and generous with his time. He did everything he could to help those in need, Fee. Delphi squealed happily when mentioning the prince, but seemed to remember something as her expression quickly changed afterwards. She now looked sad. But that's no longer the case, Fee. What do you mean? Kona asked, still extremely confused. There is an evil group of mermaids. No, they're more like monsters. They're sirens, Fee. They have taken over the kingdom, Fee. They attacked and left every single citizen completely drained of any confidence power, Fee. They wanted to take the source of our magic and are now using it to control the citizens, Fee, Delphi explained. Their king is very ruthless and he hasn't backed down at all despite any of our efforts, Fee. Delphi sniffled slightly. It started with taking people's confidence power, but the Siren King didn't stop there, Fee. He got a taste of the power he had and decided that he wanted more. Taking people's confidence power just wasn't enough, Fee. Taking everyone's confidence power left every single citizen unable to fight back against his advances, and the king was able to successfully destroy the entirety of the Ocean Kingdom, Fee. He left it in ruin. Everything was destroyed, Fee. Tears began to flow freely down the side of Delphi's face, as well as they could underwater. Kona watched, still feeling extremely confused, but also beginning to feel sympathetic towards Delphi at the same time. Of course, she had never gone through anything nearly as drastic, but anyone would feel sympathy for someone who had. The prince and I were able to escape before everything was thrown completely into ruin, Fee. We escaped to the human world with only the most necessary objects that would help protect our magic, Fee. As long as the source of our magic is protected, there is a chance that the kingdom and its citizens can be revived in the future, Fee. If the evil sirens and their king get a hold of our magic, not only would that mean the end of our world completely, but this one as well, Fee. This world? Kona finally muttered. Yes, Fee. Our magic would make him too strong to defeat, Fee. Where is this prince? You said you two came here together, right? Delphi looked down. There was a group of sirens that managed to follow us here to the human world, Fee. They attacked this ship and were trying to get us to give up the objects we had brought with us, Fee. This ship? So you mean that this wrecked ship is the ship you two sailed on? Yes, Fee. The sirens kept attacking it, and eventually it came to a point where the prince knew that both of us weren't going to get out alive if we stayed together, Fee. He told me to wait within his journal until the time was right with his medallion and the heart shells. His medallion is the key to the source of our magic, and the heart shells are the only way I can find the legendary Precure, Fee. The Precure? Kona asked. Are they also people from your world? The Precure are legendary warriors who are said to be the only ones able to possess the necessary power to defeat a threat as imposing and large as the Siren King, Fee. The prince told me that when I was released from the journal that it was my mission to find them and save the Ocean Kingdom, Fee, Delphi explained. The problem is that the Precure haven't been seen in several centuries, so finding them or even new ones is going to be very difficult. Most people think they are only a myth, Fee. But I have to look for them regardless, Fee. They're our only remaining hope for the kingdom, and I made a promise to the prince that I would find them, Fee. I do not intend to break that promise, Fee. Kona closed her eyes and hummed over the information she had just been given by this oddball dolphin creature. So let me get this straight, Kona said. You are a dolphin creature that is actually some form of fairy creature, and your name is Delphi. You come from a far off world or other universe called the Ocean Kingdom that was overtaken and destroyed by an evil king who is trying to steal your magic so he has the strength to take over this world and yours as well. You tried to stop him and his minions alongside your prince, but were unsuccessful, so now you are in search of the Precure, who are the only ones who can help you to restore your world. Yes, Feet, Delphi said with a nod. For the time being, the sirens shouldn't interfere with the search as the prince was successful in sealing them away from those world feet. The act unfortunately took his life, but he managed to keep this world safe from the horrors that befell our own kingdom, Fee. The sirens will likely find a way to come back, but it shouldn't happen for a long time, Fee. I'm still not sure I completely understand. I've never thought that worlds with magic and talking dolphins would ever exist. Hell, humans in this world think us mermaids are myths as it is, Kona said. But I still want you to know that regardless, I'm very sorry to hear what you have gone through. Losing your kingdom and someone you are close to is never easy for anyone, so I'm sorry you had to experience it. I know my situation and experience is nowhere near the level yours was, but I can understand where you're coming from as I lost my biological parents. You did, Fee? How? They abandoned me when I was just a baby. My grandparents always told me that they did so because they weren't prepared to be parents, but I'm still not sure if they are telling me the whole truth, Kona explained. I never got to know my biological parents, but I still miss them dearly and I want to find them. I want to find them and ask them why. Why did they abandon me? Is what my grandparents told me true, or was the reason something else? Whatever it is, I just want to know. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, miss. What was your name, Fee? Kona. My name is Kona. That is a very pretty name, Fee, Delphi squealed. Thank you, Kona said with a smile. Oh, I have an idea, Fee. Finding the Precure and finding your parents will be hard for both of us if we continue searching on our own, so why don't we join together and search together, Fee? I'll help you look for your parents while we look for the Precure, Fee. Kona nodded and her smile grew wider. That doesn't sound too bad. I'm in. Hooray, Fee! Suddenly, there was a loud, explosive sound that radiated through the bottom of the trench, and the shipwreck shook violently. Delphi and Kona both screamed while Kona held onto the small creature. They held it together and waited for the uprooted dust and debris to settle. What the hell was that? Oh no, it can't be, Fee, Delphi said, her voice audibly shaking. They can't be back already. The prince sealed them away, Fee. Delphi, what are you talking about? It's the sirens. They're attacking us, Fee. What? But I thought you said they'd been sealed away. They were, Fee, but they seem to have already been broken free from that seal, Fee. Shit, what do we do? Grab the heart shells, the medallion, and the journal. We cannot lose those, Fee. After that, we can try and escape, Fee. Kona nodded and quickly got up from her spot on the floor. She quickly collected the 4 heart shells, the medallion, and the journal, and then put them all inside her satchel. The shipwreck shook violently once again, with another loud explosion sound, which caused Kona to crouch down and cover her head. Delphi, what do we do? Kona asked, nearly on the verge of tears. We'll escape through that window, Fee, Delphi said, pointing to the window on the wall to the left of the desk. Worst case scenario, we're spotted, and the sirens and I have to fight. You just need to get away and get somewhere safe, Fee. But what about you? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Fee. Now go, Fee! Kona took a deep breath and grabbed Delphi, holding her small body close to try and keep her safe and hidden. She then swam towards the window and squeezed through the gap between the ship and the wall of the trench before beginning to try and swim upwards. Hey! A loud, booming voice cut through the area and stopped Kona dead in her tracks. She gulped down the large lump that had formed in her throat and turned her head to look behind her. Floating there was a decrepit, decayed-looking mermaid. This mermaid was visibly covered with black scales all over their body and tail, which covered up their skin that looked to be a deep red color. The fins on the end of her tail were what looked to be a pale red, and they looked as if they had been torn to shreds. From a distance, it looked as if she may have also been wearing some form of golden jewelry, but it wasn't clear what that was exactly. Whoever or whatever this mermaid was, they certainly meant Kona harm. You, give me that sea fairy, the mermaid demanded in a low, menacing tone. Kona had been completely overtaken by fear. She had only ventured out to explore the shipwreck, but now was in a situation that could mean life or death. She hadn't meant to find a magical sea creature or an evil-looking mermaid. She had just wanted to explore. She had just wanted to have fun. "Oh no, that's Lockfeet," Delphi whispered. "Lock?" Kona whispered back. "She is one of the evil sirens, and she's really aggressive, Feet." Kona gulped at the sound of that. An aggressive enemy was never a good one. "I said give me the sea fairy, now!" Locke repeated, this time more forcefully. "I'm right here, Feet!" Delphi quickly squirmed out of Kona's arms and swam towards Locke. Kona's eyes widened and she reached her arm out. "Delphi!" Kona called. "Ah, there you are. We thought we were never going to uncover where you were hiding," Locke sneered. "Now, hand over the prince's medallion." "In your dreams, you evil siren, Fee! You know I will never give it to you, Fee." "So you choose to refuse? Well, what are you going to do to fight back if I just try to take it?" "I'm going to do my best to fight you, Fee! You will never get the prince's medallion or our The siren rolled her eyes and did a flicking motion with her fingers, which caused a black spike to appear right next to Delphi and hit her away as if she were a mere baseball. Delphi hit the ground and groaned a bit, but began to try and push herself up. "What an annoying little pest," Locke muttered while glowering at Delphi. "Delphi!" Kona shouted. Locke had almost forgotten about Kona entirely after Delphi had swam around from her arms. Once she shouted, Locke snapped her head in Kona's direction and grinned slyly. Kona gulped again and recoiled. "Ah, I had forgotten about you," Locke said. "So you're that fairy's accomplice. Then tell me, where is the prince's medallion?" Kona knew full well that the medallion Locke was after was right there in her satchel that laid against her hip, and she wanted to just take it out and hand it over in hopes it would keep her safe from any harm Locke might inflict. But she couldn't. She had told Delphi that she would help her look for the Precure and restore her kingdom, and Delphi had promised Kona to help her find her biological parents. Kona couldn't lose that opportunity, nor betray someone so soon after meeting them. She just couldn't do that. I don't have it," Kona muttered quietly. "What? I don't have it!" Locke's already present frown deepened into an expression that was far more sinister. Kona recoiled further as this expression greatly frightened her. "You have a lot of nerve speaking to me that way, mermaid." I didn't mean... I don't care what your intentions were. You need to listen to me or it is going to spell dire consequences for you. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Give me the prince's medallion. Now! Locke demanded while holding out her hand. Kona's hand hovered over the flap of her satchel as she considered her options. She absolutely did not want to give Locke the medallion and betray Delphi already, but she also didn't want to put herself in harm's way. It was such a hard decision, and she just stayed there, completely frozen in place, while Locke stared her down. She had to make a decision. "Maybe you didn't hear me. Give me the prince's medallion this instant, or I'll..." "No." "Excuse me?" "I said no!" Kona shouted. Locke's eyes widened, not expecting Kona to fight back against her demands. She then became angry, and her face twisted into a glower, accentuated by a deep, irritated growl. "So you're gonna make it difficult, eh? Well, I can make your life much, much worse." Locke held her arms above her head and began to conjure up what looked to be a large cloud of black and purple-colored energy. This cloud separated into 6 separate spheres that gained a sort of shininess to them as if they were metal balls. Locke forcefully moved her hands in Kona's direction, and all of the spheres flew out and seemingly surrounded her. They exploded, some hitting the wall of the trance and causing a large cloud of debris and dust to kick up. "Kona!" Delphi screamed. Kona floated down to the bottom of the trance and laid there limply on the edge of unconsciousness. Delphi swam over to her and tried to shake her fully awake. "Kona! Kona!" "Shit, that hurt," Kona muttered. "Kona!" I'm alright, Delphi. It thankfully wasn't a direct hit." Kona grunted and slowly pushed herself up and looked Locke dead in the eyes with a determined glare. Locke glared black and grit her teeth. Some people may say that I can be shy and timid sometimes, but I am certainly not a pushover. I will pursue my goals as best as I can, and I will fight for what's right, especially if anyone I care about is in danger," Kona said. "I may get hurt in the process, but I will continue to stand up and keep going because I want the people I care about to be safe. Pa, Nan, Corinne, my parents, I want them all to be safe." "Kona," Delphi muttered. They're not going to be safe if you don't cooperate with me, Locke grumbled. Maybe not, but they would be even worse off if I gave you the medallion. As long as I don't give it to you, I can still do something to protect everyone. Stop being so stubborn, you stupid little girl. Just hand over the medallion. This is your final chance. Locke shouted and held her right hand up, and another cloud of the dark purple energy appeared. It took on the form of a large spike, which would surely kill Kona if it struck her. Kona gulped once more, but her stance didn't falter. I am not going to give you the tool you need to destroy this world. You may have already taken over Delphi's world, but I promise you that I will do everything in my power to prevent you from doing the same to mine, Kona said. I am going to protect this world and protect everyone that I love, because I don't want to see them suffer at the hands of evil creatures like you. Kona looked down at Delphi and flashed her a smile. I also promised Delphi that I would help her restore her kingdom, and in return, she promised me that she would help me find my biological parents. If I let you take the medallion, then I lose that chance, and I break the promise I made. I will not do that, because that's not the person I am. Kona looked up at Locke, her resolve to fight back evident in her expression. I am not going to give you the medallion, and I will not let you destroy this world. Ugh, just shut up! Locke shouted and threw her arm forwards, sending the spike barreling towards Kona. Kona! Delphi shouted. Just as the spike was about to hit Kona, a bright pink light began to shine from the middle of her chest. The energy coming from said light was enough to shatter the spike into many tiny pieces that instantly disappeared into dust. Locke covered her eyes with her arms as the light shone and grunted. Ugh, what's this light? Delphi, what is this? Kona asked. What's with this light? What's going on? The intensity of the light died down slightly as a small object materialized in front of Kona's eyes. The object, a small charm, fell into the palm of her hand. No way, Fee! You're a Precure, Fee! Delphi cheered excitedly. What? Me? Yes! Your strong will to protect your world and the people you care about created your very own sea charm, Fee! My sea charm? The top of Kona's satchel opened completely on its own, and out of it flew two of the objects she'd found in the shipwreck. One was the journal she had found, and the other was one of the golden shell-shaped compacts. The journal became enveloped in a bright white light that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared to reveal that the book had transformed. It had changed from a simple brown, leather-bound book to one that was almost entirely white. In the corners of the cover were decorative purple swirls with golden decorative beads, some shaped like different kinds of small shells. In the center of the book there was a seashell shape that looked like a sort of window, and above that were the words, Ocean Book. The book changed? Forget about the book, Fee! Take the heart shell, insert your sea charm, and transform, Fee! Kona looked at the small charm in her hand and then back at the compact floating in front of her face. She gave Delphi a look to ask one last time if she was sure, and Delphi only nodded. Kona then grabbed the compact, grasping it tightly. Let's dive in! Precure, Marine, splash! The compact opened and Kona inserted the sea charm. She then took her finger and spun around the pearl inside, starting the transformation with a torrent of water. There's no way, Locke muttered and grit her teeth as Kona transformed. The shining orb of the sea! Pure pearl! Kona had transformed into a completely different form. She now wore an outfit with a pink, shoulderless top with an orange diamond below the chest. At the top of it was a sort of belt of pearls with her heart shell in the center of her chest. The heart shell also had a yellow bow coming out of the bottom. There was another belt of pearls connected in the front by a golden heart-shaped gem around her waist, which held up a dark pink skirt. Her tail had also changed. In addition to it obviously growing in length, the color had changed from a solid pink to a gradient where a lighter pink faded to an orange. Her fins had also changed from pink to yellow. The color of her hair had changed as well, and it was very similar to her tail, a pink fading to an orange. Her hair was also now a lot longer, poofier, and softer. On her wrists, skirt, bottom of her tail, and tying up her hair were pieces of transparent fabric, most being orange except for her wrists, those were pink. What happened? I look so different, Pearl said, her voice wavering with clear panic. Woohoo! You transformed into a Precure, Fee! I'm so happy, Fee! This is what a Precure looks like? Do they all have such soft hair? Gah! Who cares? Locke shouted. Both Pearl and Delphi were startled, having almost forgotten about her entirely due to the excitement of the transformation. I thought the Precure had been destroyed centuries ago. How did you transform? It was my mission to come to this world and find them because they are our only hope of defeating you, Fee. Kona's will to protect those she cares for resonated with the heart shells and granted her the power to transform, Fee. The Precure's power still exists, and we will use it to defeat you, Fee. You worthless piece of... Gah! Locke formed another large, dark-colored spike with her magic and then began to swim at an extremely high speed towards Pearl. Pearl's eyes widened quickly before she squeezed them shut and crossed her arms in front of her face to block the oncoming attack. She didn't expect it to work, but it was all she could think to do in the moment. But to her surprise, the attack never landed. When it didn't hit, Pearl slowly opened her eyes and saw a pink, heart-shaped shield above her arms blocking the spike Locke was trying to use to attack her. The spike seemed to be shuddering back and forth as Locke tried to push it through the shield. What? Locke shouted. Thinking quickly, Pearl forcefully uncrossed her arms, throwing them outwards and downwards towards her hips. This caused her shield to disappear, but with a large burst of energy that blew Locke backwards and sent her spiraling into the wall of the trench. There was a sort of small explosion, causing rubble and dust to cloud the immediate area. Whoa, that was so strong, Pearl commented, looking at her hands. I didn't know I had this sort of power. Don't focus on that right now, Fee! Look! Delphi pointed towards the cloud of dust. Locke was slowly getting up while groaning and grumbling to herself. She held out her hand over the right side of her head and glared up at Pearl. How dare you! Locke shot upwards and threw a punch directly towards Pearl's face. Pearl thrust her left hand up, and another pink heart-shaped shield appeared to block the punch. Locke growled and then began to scream angrily while she continued to throw more and more punches, each one being blocked by Pearl's shields. How are you so fucking strong? Locke shouted. You think I have any clue? Pearl shouted back. Locke hesitated just long enough at the response for Pearl to find an opening to throw her own punch. She formed one of her heart shields and punched Locke, sending her spiraling backwards yet again. Locke cursed below her breath and shook her head before looking forwards and seeing that Pearl was no longer there. What? Where'd she go? Locke shouted angrily. Up here! Locke looked upwards towards the voice and saw Pearl swimming towards her very quickly. Her eyes went wide. What the... Before she could finish the thought, Pearl slapped Locke with her tail and once again sent her spiraling to the ground, the sand kicking up into another thick cloud of dust. Whoa, Pearl simply muttered, looking at her tail fins. Pearl, finish her off before she gets back up, Fee, Delphi called. Touch the gem on your heart shell and use your attack, Fee. Pearl nodded with a determined expression and touched the gem on her heart shell. It began to glow a light pink, and many orbs of light emerged from within. These orbs maneuvered into a line before transforming into a chain of pearls. Pearl grasped the chain. Precure, gleaming pearl chain! Pearl lifted the chain over her head and then swung it downwards to whip it in Locke's direction. Locke easily noticed, her eyes going wide. Shit! Locke used the strength she still had to disappear before Pearl's attack could land. The chain disappeared, and Pearl allowed herself to finally relax when she saw that Locke had also disappeared. She began to breathe heavily as she thought over what had just transpired. Pearl had only wanted to go out to a shipwreck and explore because that's what she had loved to do. It was supposed to be a simple outing, nothing was supposed to happen, but she had run into a dolphin-like creature, a fairy, and had been given some sort of magical abilities that allowed her to transform into a completely different form with incredible strength. If Pearl was honest with herself, she had not believed Delphi even a little bit when she had first told her about the fate of the Ocean Kingdom. She was sympathetic, sure, but she thought she was dreaming after being knocked out or something similar. But now she knew that Delphi wasn't lying. That didn't make it any easier for her to come to terms with, though. Pearl? Pearl! Pearl snapped out of her thoughts and looked at Delphi. Huh? Are you okay, Fee? Delphi asked. You zoned out for a bit there, Fee. Oh, yeah, I am. It's just that I'm still shocked by everything that just happened. We were attacked by an evil magic siren and I transformed into a magical warrior of sorts. It's all a bit much to take in at one time, you know? I understand, Fee. And don't worry, you don't have to accept everything right now, Fee. It'll all sink in eventually and you'll understand everything better soon, Fee, Delphi said. And besides, I can help you along the way and guide you along your path to becoming a stronger fighter, Fee. Thank you, Delphi. The coast of a local town on the surface was calm and serene as the day was coming to an end and the citizens were winding down. The sun was beginning to set along the horizon, which cast a beautiful orange hue across the sky. It was a relaxing atmosphere, and many people would take walks in the cool air before hunkering down for the night. On one secluded beach that very few people knew existed was a set of boulders that made a great place to sit. Atop the boulders were two young girls, one dressed in her everyday clothes and the other wearing a bathing suit. I really wish I could come swim with you tomorrow, Shio, but my dad is making me work at the stall this weekend. I guess we've been getting a lot more business recently, and he hasn't hired someone new to cover me when I'm not there yet. Sorry, the girl in casual clothes said. Don't feel sorry, Hikaru. I understand. And hey, more business means more money, so I'm sure it will be okay in the long run, the girl in the bathing suit responded. Yeah, we certainly need it, Hikaru said, and jumped off the rock and turned around to leave. Oh, by the way, do you think you could text Kaito-kun later about our project for history? I know he wants to meet up this weekend to work on it, but I might not be able to. Of course, I'm sure he'll understand. Have a good weekend, Hikaru. Thanks, Shio. Stay safe. Hikaru left with a smile sitting on her face. Once she was gone, Shio turned towards the water and put her goggles down on her face before she dove into the water.